I'm not an exterminator, but I've told this to an exterminator, and he said it topped any of his stories. Luckily, it didn't happen to me. My friend went on a week-long work trip. Got in from the airport Friday night, late, tired, and decided to just have a frozen pizza. Turns on the oven to preheat to 450. Went upstairs to take a shower, and jumped out of the shower when the fire alarm went off. A family of mice had set up house in the oven. The smell of roasting mouse nest, mouse piss, and a litter of baby mice was unbelievably bad, and lasted for weeks in the house. The oven was a total loss. It couldn't be used at all without that smell coming back. So when I was living in a tropical country, my boyfriend's apartment got a termite/ant colony, Mayi in the local language. They were nesting in his kitchen, since he never really used the kitchen, and there was a language barrier with the landlord. Not good excuses in my opinion, but hey, he knew what I thought, and it's not my house. He never got around to getting something done about it. Then one night in early summer, we have the first major rains of the season. We're out with our dog, and as we come back to the apartment building, we notice a huge cloud of insects out the front. Weird, but not that weird in the tropics. So we get into his apartment and open the door, and the scene that met us made my skin instantly just want to crawl off me. The air was so thick with winged termites that we couldn't see across his living room. Thick cloud of insects, just from opening the door, and we've both got a face full of them. They're in our hair. My boyfriend slams the door shut and pretty much panics. I can't say I blame him for that, but I was simultaneously furious and sympathetic. I called our friend to act as an emergency translator, and she called the landlord to explain. The landlord paid for us to stay in a motel that night, and was ultimately way more accommodating than necessary, given the avoidable screw-up that just occurred. The next day, exterminators came to clear out the nest, and all the critters had gone, and shed their wings all over the apartment. We were still finding them right up until he moved. Gross. Okay, so this is to preface my story. My partner works from home, so in fair weather, we leave our back door open so that our dog and cat can freely wander out in the backyard. Unfortunately, this meant that our cat would bring in live mice as toys, fiddling with them until she got bored, and then leaving them to roam. For the most part, we always caught the mice and sent them on their way. Unfortunately, this meant that she felt comfortable chasing vermin into the house, and when she found a giant rat noshing on our raspberries, she chased it straight into our home. Scratch that, straight into my kitchen. No wait, she chased it into the range, and it nested into the insulation between the oven and the top stove, where I could hear it scratching around. I'm not gonna lie, I totally screamed and wigged out before I got it all together and started disassembling the range to get the thing out. Finally, I got it out of my range and it ran directly into the basement, living in the insulation, enjoying the buffet of potatoes, yams, onions, and squash. At this point, we named him Fievel, and spent 2 months arguing about what to do. My partner, while creeped out by the idea of a rat living in our home, thought I was being ridiculous if I removed all the food from the basement, and he felt that leaving glue traps was the way to go. Rats are apparently smarter than that. This little dude seriously just flipped the glue traps over so that they were stuck to the floor. Thanks, dude. I even caught him using the laths on the ceiling like catwalks to avoid walking on the floor where the traps were. Our cat did nothing but yell at the rat. The dogs pretended to know nothing of the rat, and I had nightmares about the rat bullying our guinea pig and stealing her food. Finally, when my partner had to go away for the weekend, I went to work ridding us of fever. First, I removed all the food. Then I put a single potato in a large Rubbermaid container next to the regular potato supply. The jummy dumped in and couldn't get out, so I escorted him out. I couldn't stomach killing my foe these long months, but I had already lost enough potatoes and didn't hesitate to turn him out of my house. I spent the summer between high school and college, working for a locally run exterminating company. Nice gig. Residential treatments during the day, mosquito fogging at night, and the occasional dairy farm treated for flies and rats. One day, I'm at one of these dairy farms and enter the milking parlour to spray and set up traps, and I see a rather large cat across the parlour from the front door. Good for him, I think. Growing fat, eating rodents, and whatever else he's caught over the years. I enter the parlour, and the cat moves, and I realise the cat is not a cat, but a rat. Easily the size of a 12 to 15 pound feline, and running down a drainage pipe. I decided that I did not want to be a sacrifice to the Rat King that day, and noped out of there fast. We once hired an exterminator. We had a wasp's nest in our trailer, and the guy had us sign the contract when we went to take a look. He peeked under the siding, took the contract and ripped it up, and drove away. He just said, "I can't help you," and bailed. So what the hell do we do? We sealed up the outside with foam caulk and duct taped the vents solid. We already had mesh taped over because the wasps would constantly pour out of the vents. Dad waited until night to empty 3 cans full of spray into the main nest entrance, sealed it up, and then ran off into the darkness. Mum's sister and I were huddled inside, and the entire trailer was humming and shaking. It was like being inside a horror movie. The wasps made little tapping sounds against the vents and walls. The next day we took off the siding and found the main nest a little bigger than a basketball, with other nest parts branching out through the heating ducts. It was so nice not to wake up with wasps on my pillow and getting stung in the shower. I hate trailers. We have a problem with Japanese beetles, like a big one. I bought a trap after seeing 10 or 20 hanging out on my roses, but then the trap was completely full within about an hour. So I go to investigate. Surely they didn't all come from my roses, right? So I start checking my trees, a few here and there, until I get to this creep myrtle at the very edge of the yard. It was literally covered in the beetles, as in the beetles were mating. Hundreds upon thousands of beetles. My dad decided the thing to do was to shake the tree and scare them off. This was the worst idea ever. Beetles rained from the heavens. The sky was dark and swirling with beetles. They covered me enough that I had to retreat to a safe distance. They stuck in my hair and were crawling in my clothes. My dad stopped, dropped and rolled as these beetles were stirring into action. So were all the beetles from all the trees beyond. It was Armageddon. I was not convinced I would survive this, and a few days later, my dad, dressed in a makeshift hazmat suit, went out and doused every tree with the most toxic bug killer he could find. Even now, weeks later, we have to pick the stiff corpses of beetles out of our dog's fur whenever he comes inside, and I still have nightmares. I lived in an apartment in a fairly nice area when my wife and I were first married. We had just left a rental house with a shitty landlord, so we were so excited to be back in an apartment with maintenance and whatnot. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment with our dogs and an occasional roommate, a friend who was in her last year of college. Soon after moving in, we start noticing some roaches. Living in Texas, you get used to the big ones coming in from the outside occasionally, but these were babies. I know babies means infestation, so I'm not happy at all. The complex has an exterminator come out every Friday, and all you have to do is put your name on the list, and they will come out and spray. We have our name on the list for 2 straight months, still getting roaches. We buy those little plug things that are supposed to bother pests into leaving, but getting roaches still, and we spray it with stuff ourselves. They don't go. I even bug bombarded the apartment with way more poison than it says to use for the size of the apartment. And when I come home, all the baby roaches are still all over the wall right above the poison line. Finally, after about 6 months after moving in, the family of 5 that live in the apartment above us move out. The complex cleans and sprays upstairs, and we see maybe 1 more roach the rest of our stay there. It makes me wonder what kind of horrid condition that apartment was in. My stepson spent the weekend at his half-brother's house, and everything went well. A couple of weeks later, one of the kids at our house was getting bites, but it was summer, and we all just assumed mosquitoes. As the season turns to fall, and then winter, he is getting bitten, plus a couple of other kids. Now it's definitely not mosquitoes, and it's happening in the house. We look, and there's no lice. We checked the bed, and didn't see anything. This goes on for another 2 weeks, until one of the kids brings down a brown bug, which I had to Google, never having seen one like it, and it's a bed bug. Thus begins 6 months of the most exhausting and mind-boggling bug fight I have ever had. Finally I realised they were living in the wood panelling in their walls, and I duct-taped them in. Then we had a company bring in a giant heater to boil the entire house for 3 days, as nothing else will really kill them. We got rid of our infestation, and finally found out that the half-brother had such a big infestation himself that they were crawling all over the mattress, bed frame, nightstand and carpet. He knew, but didn't want to tell his parents, so just lived with them for who knows how long. I think they had to throw away all his stuff to rid themselves of them. Last year, about this time of year, we were sitting in the lounge watching TV, doing the evening wind down, when I notice a white dot on the carpet near my dog. Oh wait, it's moving. Shit, is it a maggot? In the center of my living room. I get rid of it, and no sooner had I removed it, I saw another, and another. There's a few steady stream of maggots coming in from my patio door. Must have been about 200 or so by the time I'd cleared out most of them. I gingerly opened both patio doors to find the worst maggot infestation I'd ever seen. For reasons unknown, they were emerging from the damp course and up through the patio cracks. I'm still convinced something died under my house, and they made their way to the surface. There were literally thousands. I'm pouring bleach, white vinegar, boiling water and salt, and these creatures just keep coming. I'm sweeping the carcasses into a dustpan and disposing them into the drain to try and stem the tide of swarming maggot armies from forming in my house. I eventually must have gotten to them, as they all stopped hatching from beneath the patio. Seriously disgusting. Ever popped maggots in your fingers trying to pick them out of your carpet? I have. I was about 8, and we were planning to leave on vacation. My grandma would be house-sitting for us, and had arrived a few days earlier. She was staying in our guest room. For about 3 nights, she complained about this buzzing sound in the guest room at night. We couldn't hear it during the day. Right before we were supposed to leave, she noticed a wasp in the guest room. She tried to shoo it outside, but it was super angry and stung her. She went to retrieve a fly swatter, and when she opened the door to the guest bedroom, there were now about 10 wasps buzzing around. After getting stung a few more times, she decided this wasn't a battle that she would win. Thankfully, she had the sense to close the door and put a wet towel up against the crack. When my mum and I got home, the window to the guest room was black with the mass of wasps. We had over 10,000 in the house, all confined to that room. There was a nest about 4 by 4 inside the ceiling, and they had broken through the ceiling in search of more space. Seeing the black window and hearing loud buzzing from inside the room, knowing that these things were out for blood, was something I'll never forget. I'm only thankful it happened a few days before we went on our trip, and not during our vacation. We called an exterminator, who in full bee attire moved the wet towel which was blocking the door, just enough to put in a tube. He pumped in some type of poison into the room for about an hour, and we spent the next week vacuuming up wasps instead of going on vacation. It was a nightmare. But it was fun to write about in my What I Did on Summer Vacation essay. The house I lived in previously always had a mild ant problem. They'd come into my room and get into my water glass, crawl around my bed, and be generally annoying. We could never figure out where they were coming from. Fast forward to the last day of our lease, and we're moving all the stuff around out of the backyard, and my housemate and I went to lift up our fire pit. It was weirdly heavier than we remembered it. We had ourselves and another housemate try and lift it, and all of a sudden, we pull it back to reveal a monstrous anthill that had built up into the fire pit. In addition to seething with ants, there was also a ton of worms and spiders crawling around out of there. It was horrifying and fascinating. It was our last day, and we were kind of perturbed with our landlord, and at the same time, we just left it. We do wonder what became of it. In our second apartment, the air conditioner broke down, and it took the crappy management over 2 months to even come and look at it. This was in Georgia in August, so we cranked up the ceiling and table fans, and opened the one window in our tiny place. I'm guessing that's how the fleas got in, because our 2 cats never ever went outside. Well, we were out of the apartment for about a week, visiting someone out of town, and when we came back things seemed to be okay at first, until I saw the white stovetop was black with flea poop. Our poor cat was covered in them, and the whole apartment was infested. Management didn't do a damn thing about it. Go figure. So we wound up bombing the place at least 3 times. The cat got bathed every day, and I found the hardest way that I'm allergic to flea bites. We almost developed some kind of PTSD from it, which I like to call post-bug insanity. Every inch of our skin was a flea. Every small black dot or lint was a flea. We could feel them on our face and in our hair. I almost lost my mind. I have OCD as well, and I have the same scratching and picking compulsion. So for a solid month, I was a bloody, sniffling mess. The air conditioning was still out, so I wore nothing but basically a thin bedsheet around the house while taking Benadryl like candy. It was miserable. Nothing we tried for the damn fleas worked, but the only way we were able to be free of them was to move out to another city. 2 more places later, and we're dealing with fleas again. But thank God, it was nowhere near as bad as it was last time. Now, we just comb the cats, use the topical prevention, and ruthlessly murder every tiny one that we can see. And it's pretty much under control. My girlfriend stayed over when I was living in this particular apartment building from January to May this year. She ended up covered in red welts about 3 months in. We didn't know where they were coming from. Then we saw another couple in the elevator, where the lady was covered in bites just like my girlfriend. We also noticed a pest scene investigator van outside the building and thought that we might have a bedbug situation. We set up some traps and bought diatomaceous earth to sprinkle around the bed and near any cracks and crevices. A day later, I saw dead bedbugs around the bedposts and linings of the bed frame. When I lifted up the spring box, it was a major infestation. Way worse than I initially thought. I spoke to the manager and let her know I wanted to move out right away and to terminate my lease. She was understanding and then began candidly discussing the building's situation, which had been ongoing apparently. She said that they've had bedbugs on the 4th, 8th and 9th floors. They treat it with fumigation, but the bedbugs just keep moving around. What I find most alarming was that I wasn't alerted to the situation when I first moved in back in January. They knew the floors above me had a major infestation and elected not to inform me. I am a termite treater. I have a couple of stories, but the ones that really come to the top of my head are the ones where the floor had literally collapsed to the ground. The guy says, "Yeah, the floor sags a bit," and I called the boss up and he rushed out with the pretty new inspector and had him change that contract immediately. Another time we were treating a basement with foam insulation on the ceiling. So if you're in the basement and look up, that's what I'm talking about. And the termites don't eat that stuff, but they can move through it really easily. So they basically turn them into highways, and this stuff was a damn mega highway. It was actually really cool to see, but after talking to this customer, turns out he thought it was cool too, so he let it stay there for years. He also didn't know they were termites. He thought it was a fungus. I mean, really? Years? And you do nothing? And did I mention that he went on and on about how he was an engineer? When I was about 6, my dad moved into a cottage out in the country, and about 2 to 3 weeks in, we're noticing a larger than normal amount of wasps around the house. Now my dad is a tradesman and has friends in just about every trade. So one of his friends, a retired exterminator, who used to deal with wasps' nests, agreed to give the house a look over for us in return for some beer and the cost of whatever supplies he needed to deal with it. He showed up with some of his old gear and heads up into the attic. Not 30 seconds pass before he's down with the ladder again, gives my dad the number of a trusted company he knows, and tells us to stay in a hotel. Apparently, one of the walls in the attic, roughly 2 to 3 meters squared, was just one giant wasp's nest. Thousands of these things were living up there. But, due to the excellent insulation, had gone unheard and unnoticed by the old couple that lived there before. 6-year-old me loved all of this because we got to go on holiday. Must have been a nightmare for my mum and stepmom. I used to service an apartment complex weekly. I walk in one morning and see a unit on my service request sheet for a bedbug inspection. No big deal, done thousands of them many times before. Prior to leaving the office, the property manager comes up and says to me, "Please be careful. Maintenance was just in there and they said it was bad." Whatever, I thought. They've got a lower pest tolerance and I've seen some bad ones. But boy was I wrong. I walk in and was immediately hit with the musky, pheromonic scent of bedbugs. I hadn't even made it through the door before thinking, oh God. Bedbugs are in the light switch plate by the front door. They're in the door jambs. I walk in and they're everywhere. There's nothing in this apartment but a couch and a television, and they're loaded too. They're on the shower curtain, they're in the kitchen sink, and I estimate that at the time of my arrival there are at least 100,000 bedbugs in that unit. The resident had self-treated with rubbing alcohol for the prior 6 years, and it was apparent. My initial service was 12 hours on one efficiency unit. It's been 8 to 9 years, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I've been in pest control for the past 6 or so years. I've seen everything from roaches literally raining from the ceilings to rat-infested garbage dumps. By far the worst thing that has stuck with me was a heavy bedbug infestation. I've never personally found them on someone's pet before. This client had a dog that had left big, thick strands of blood smeared on the wall from trying to get them off him. His bedroom was absolutely loaded with these guys, and was somewhat of a hoarder in a small 2-bedroom apartment. The pillow was nearly black from all the fecal matter left behind, and the smear marks left from this guy walking up in the middle of the night, just smashing those little things against the wall, is burnt into my memory. It almost looked like a crime scene. Needless to say, there were more bedbugs than I could even try to count. They were found dead in coffee cups, up on shelves, and spider webs throughout the house, flushed from trim work and found deep in every light socket. There's so much stuff we see that it just becomes normal after a while, and even the heavy nasty stuff. Sleep tight. Don't let the bedbugs bite. I used to be in the division of my company that deals with bedbugs. We treat homes, hotels, apartments by using electric heaters powered by generators to heat the house to 135 and holding it there for about 5 hours. Most jobs aren't that bad. The infestation is only centered around the bed, and the infestation is what I would call light, with only a few adults to be around. But the worst infestation I'd ever seen was in a fairly upscale 2-bedroom apartment. It started off when I walked in and my boss's boss was there and let us know that he didn't expect that job would pass on the first try, which is surprising consider we have like a 99% success rate. So I start to look around and everything seems fine. The apartment is fairly well kept, clean kitchen, living room, with a nice couch and vacuumed carpet. Nothing to worry about, right? That's when I noticed something on the wall. A bedbug walking along it, which is surprising because they're usually found on the bed, remember? Well then, all of a sudden, I am noticing them more on the wall, on the floor, on the couch, everywhere. I continue on into the bathroom and the first bathroom, and it's the same. But I can tell something is off. Where are they coming from? And then I see it. The second bedroom is nothing like the rest of the well-furnished apartment. It consisted of a box spring mattress, just lying on the floor and a cheap nightstand. And unlike the rest of the apartment, this room is black. Now, what you have to understand is after a bedbug feeds on you, it goes back to its hiding spot and defecates nearby. Usually this results in a little peppering around the corners of the mattress. This room, however, is caked in this stuff. There are streaks along the corners of the wall. The carpet is matted and off colour, and the mattress is crusty. Not to mention the thousands of bedbugs crawling around everywhere. It is by far the grossest thing I have ever seen, and I have no idea why one room was that way. But I have no idea how someone could sleep in such filth and not die of blood loss by morning. Both of my maternal grandparents were nurses for the NHS in the UK, back in the 60s. My grandfather came over from Omaha in country Tyrone, Ireland, and my grandmother went from Shepton Mallet, and they ended up working at the same hospital. One working day shift, one working night shift, and on the walk to work they'd meet on the bridge and swap over their 3 children, my mother and my twin uncles. Whenever I think of stuff like that, it seems so pleasant and romantic in my head, until I remember being told about the night shifts. Both grandparents had pretty similar experiences. If you went into one of the visitor rooms, waiting rooms or offices in the middle of the night and flicked the light, you'd initially see a completely black floor. The cockroaches would carpet that place, and as soon as the light came on, they'd all run away. My grandmother still can't stand it when she finds a cockroach, and she screams bloody murder. As an aide, my uncle Dominic, who's one of the twins, ended up working in a cruise ship casino. He got a degree in law from Oxford and then decided he wasn't interested in law, and they had a special policy that if any crew saw a cockroach, they had to call for a special cockroach man. He'd run over. I'd assume he looked like John Goodman in Arachnophobia, or What's the Point, and kill it. You were never to step on them. There was this whole thing about if you step on cockroaches, you end up carrying their eggs around. This isn't actually true, in the majority of cases, as the female cockroach normally gets a little egg pouch and then hides it somewhere, secluded. But there's always the off chance you step on a female roach still carrying the eggs, I guess. Just like my grandmother, I hate cockroaches. Our apartment got infested once. My God, it was the worst 3 years of our lives. This happened about 5 years ago. My husband and I had moved into a new apartment in a new area, and we were very excited with the move. We hadn't got any children, but we were definitely looking into adopt some kind of animal. Given our location in the city, we opted for a cat, a beautiful cat. It came to live with us, and we were all very happy, just the 3 of us. However, we quickly realized that when we wanted to go on vacation, we had to do something with the cat, and couldn't just leave it in the apartment. So, we got talking to some neighbours one day, who lived 1 floor below us, and they were telling us how they had 3 dogs, and were very experienced, and would be only too glad to look after our cat while we were away. Now bear in mind, we didn't really know these people, but being young, new to the area, trying to be friendly, and generally too trusting, we accepted their assistance. So, as far as we knew, while we were away, these people came up and looked after our cat. They did send us regular picture updates, which was always nice. And when we got home, life carried on as normal, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That's until one evening when we both got home from work, that we noticed our cat was acting odd. We went over to try and grab him, and as we were stroking his hair, we noticed that there was a tuft of fur missing from the left side of his head. This immediately alarmed us, and we began investigating the rest of his body, combing him thoroughly to ensure that we got every detail of what was going on. That's when we realized he was covered in small little bumps, red marks, and the like. It wasn't before long when we were infested in fleas. At first, we tried not to take it as a big deal. We'd never had pets before, and never even knew that fleas were that bad. We took him to the vet after we saw all those bites, and she very nonchalantly told us, "Oh, it's summer, and there's been a lot of fleas going around. You're bound to have some." So fine, we just kind of accepted it and didn't think it was a big deal. But no matter how much we tried to flea bomb the apartment, to get his injections to prevent fleas, to give him the little water in the mouth thing, nothing seemed to help. The first year, it wasn't all that bad. They seemed to come in waves. They'd be bad for a few weeks, and then when we were just getting to the point to do something about it, they'd all seem to leave. Then things started getting worse. That's when we started to get bitten in bed. Some mornings we'd wake up, and we'd still find the little buggers on our arms and legs. I had fun squeezing them in between my fingernails, as gross as it sounds, as punishment for them daring to touch me or my wife. Things didn't get better. We bought lots of chemicals and arranged to go to hotels for the night so that we could just bomb the apartment and come back and hope that they would all be gone. No amount of vacuuming, cleaning, dusting, or inspecting all of the surfaces would do anything, and we were at a total loss. That is when we resorted to getting professional help. By this point, we were in the 3rd year of the infestation, and it had gotten so bad. I'm ashamed to admit that it had almost become the norm to get up every morning and to clear the debris of black dots from the bed. It was disgusting. We were living like it and just letting all the fleas consume us and our cat on a daily basis. I don't know what came over us. We got the professional help, and the guy said that it was not as bad as some stuff he'd seen, but still pretty bad. He set up his equipment, and we had to leave. And within a few days of coming back, things seemed to start getting back to normal. I saw the odd flea here and there, and squished them, and didn't call the exterminator again for a follow-up. Big mistake. Within about 2 months, the fleas were back again with a vengeance, and I was so pissed. Me, being a cheapskate, really didn't want to call him back for another call, and my wife was giving me serious shit. So again, we called him up and repeated the same procedure, 3 times to be sure. Thankfully, this got rid of the infestation. We now have a policy where we clean every single day, comb our cat regularly, and inspect our cat's fur to make sure he hasn't picked anything up. One of the alarming things I learned is that these flea eggs are apparently so light they can catch in your clothes, and you can just travel around with them, and they can float on from person to person. That's what someone told me anyway. And the person went on to say that if someone in your office had fleas, it was very likely that the spores could pass on to you, hatch, feed on your cat, and then the infestation starts all over again. It's given me countless nightmares and lots of sleepless nights, but I'm glad that we finally got the thing sorted. Moral of the story: if you have an infestation, don't be cheap, pay, and sort it quickly. It's not worth repeat visits, and all the headaches and stress that it brings along with it.